talking about the criteria. As I've shown many screenshots of the information, but there's a lot more to it than that, just so you know. The DSM-5 is pretty inclusive of nearly all of you. You'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who can't be diagnosed as something. Now, when it comes to the criteria, we just went over those in the last video. Now let's take a look at who it is that's able to diagnose. Now let's pretend that we take away the fact that it takes 6 months to do that, and let's pretend that a doctor can do it in a day. Then let's pretend that it was a doctor who had done it and not a police officer who had diagnosed me. Because see, the police officer is not going to have the letters at the beginning or end of his name that make it okay for him or her to diagnose you with anything. It is assumed when they take somebody in who's mentally ill, such as has schizophrenia or the like, that that person has supervision of either a facility and or a parent or guardian, as well as being supervised by the state, such as a state DHS worker, especially if they are prone to violence. Now, these are the people who are supposed to work together when somebody who is schizophrenic is harmed. These people are supposed to work together to make sure that somebody who is schizophrenic is not harmed, so that person who is schizophrenic is not taking advantage of, so that person who is schizophrenic in a state of crisis, let's say your son is schizophrenic, right? And one of his voices tells him to get on a bus to California. So he sneaks onto a bus to California. Part of the way there, he gets off to go to the bathroom. Some voice told him to do it, but now he's at a rest area in like Houston, Texas, or fucking Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he's stuck there. He doesn't know when the next bus is going to come by to stop. It's hot. The rest area might be closed down as far as the restrooms go, depending on part of the year. He might be staying in a porta potty. When people get there, your son is schizophrenic. He might not even be able to explain where he's come from or where he's going to. He might be explaining to them that his dad is God and that he's Jesus. You never know. And then you've got a missing person that becomes a very complicated situation. Or maybe somebody who's got head trauma from being abused and dropped off somewhere, wandering the street and getting run over, or going to take a nap and freezing to death. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different things that can happen. Now, with Marcia Estrada, I spoke to her in a controlled environment, just me and her. There wasn't a bunch of extraneous noise. She didn't have a bunch of Christmas lights going off. She didn't have a whole bunch of music in the background. She wasn't jamming out to Pearl Jam. She wasn't none of that. It was just me and her. And when I had something on my phone to show her while I'm talking about her, I'm showing it, you know. Just like I was saying with Dr. Estrada. He said he wasn't sure if I was delusional or not. I said, well, I could change your mind real quick. Look up Wikipedia. Sean David, he said, Sean David Schwartz. He typed it up and he looked it up and he said, I don't see one for Wikipedia. I only see Everypedia. It's basically the same stuff that was on the Wikipedia one. And he read it and realized I was telling the truth about it. Same thing with Marcia Estrada. She got to see that I was telling the truth. She also understood at least some of the dynamics involved that make a person a target. She also recognized that, yes, you do eventually have to make a stand. It's one thing to say to get away from it, but it's another thing when you can't. I can't get away from the things that were done to me. The things that were done to me on paper by people who I was trying to turn in. The fact that my voice was destroyed by officers and drug addicts who wanted to pretend that I was a schizophrenic who was on drugs. At no point in time did they take the situation seriously or appropriately. We also get to see how it takes a psychiatrist 6 months. How can a police officer diagnose you as schizophrenic in a day? Why is it that my predators, who have been known to lie repeatedly, over and over and over about the situation, and have been shown to be lying over and over again on my Facebook and on my YouTube, but when does it ever get into court? It never does. The cops go out of their way to pretend that none of it exists. None of it's related. When the cops were trying to frame me as a violent schizophrenic with suicidal ideations, who stalked a girl and killed her, Waylon Lowatai was a key factor in that, but so were the other officers who were present. They were supposed to be taking me somewhere where I was safe to make a report. I had gone to Boulder because I was asked to by Officer Jai Rogers, one of the investigators in Natalie Bollinger's case. He also said, "I'll bring you the computer tomorrow, even if I have to take it to Boulder." His department worked with multiple departments across the state of Colorado to prevent me from having a safe place, to keep me in a state of panic, to prevent me from going and seeing people who could have helped me at that point, like Laura Nelson or Brenda Dickinson. Instead, as it progressed and people were having their lives threatened and people like Candace Bondurant were doing such fucked up things, people like Laura Nelson, who knew that I was telling the truth, were afraid to come forward. I've got people like Clint Snell having his name dropped by Chris Kurth and Carl Snell when they were threatening to kill me all the way back at the beginning, when I was first released from Colorado and allowed to leave state. That wasn't the first time that they did that either. Also, I was in contact, the people that were my primary helpers at that point were Shannon Alvarado, the alcoholic, Dan Fabert, who knew that a lot of people were fucking nuts. All right? He spoke about that later on, but he didn't speak up to the cops, and his excuse was, "I don't turn in fake accounts." Erin Cockerham had pretended to be Layla Johnson's sister. She was also threatening Cara Rogers. Cara Rogers was threatening Erin Cockerham. They were threatening to kill each other. Meanwhile, Layla Johnson is sending me this doctored crap, claiming that Cara Rogers, a.k.a. Cara Mia, from these Natalie Bollinger sites, is some sort of scammer who tries to get people's money out of them. And also, with the situation with Candace Bondurant, and with Candace destroying that GoFundMe that she had made, and of course, Cara Rogers destroying the GoFundMe that she had made over the situation, it became very complicated very quickly. Now, whether or not people were threatening their lives is arbitrary. The fact is that they were able to harm me and get me to do things that were not positive. Like those guys, of course, the last few days trying to call me up and pretend to be this Dr. Rainbow. Dr. Dove Rainbow. Yes, it's a strange name. I get it. I like the name personally. And then there's all these restricted number calls. And then, of course, there's even more calls than that, isn't there? Of course there is. Restricted number after restricted number after restricted number. 11:58 at night. Yep. That sure is Dr. Rainbow getting a hold of me from that number, isn't it? Or like that person in Nebraska, keeps changing their stories, but they've been messaging me for days. Obviously, I've got the evidence of the words they've been saying to me and their phone number and everything. I posted them up as a scammer. Now, Jason said that he'd go in with me tomorrow because he had to go take care of something today. But tomorrow he's going to try to help me to get them to take it seriously. I don't put this stuff up on the internet to be a jerk. I put it up on the internet because none of these services I'm sent to that are supposed to help with this actually help. None of them are providing me with a place to sit down and actually do it. Meanwhile, being forced to do this in public makes it impossible. But they're not looking at that either. They're not looking at the fact that Vicky Rain making false promises and then dumping all of my stuff while I go inside of Fred Meyer's to get something to drink. Non-alcoholic, mind you, because I don't drink alcohol. She has somebody pile all their crap against my vehicle, and I got to try to find a way to get them to investigate it. Talking to a police officer alone, they're not going to go investigate the hospital or take a look at the cameras. I'm sure not going to be allowed access to it. Meanwhile, that doctor sure as shit assaulted me at the Tillamook Hospital on January 28th. Meanwhile, an emergency room doctor cannot diagnose you with schizophrenia at all. An ER doctor is completely different. Now, when your doctor or your psychiatrist, you're having to talk to them without the evidence. You're not allowed to have your phone, so you can't show that to them. Your predators arrested you. They take your phone away. So anything that you tell the doctor basically comes down to whether or not you can prove what you're saying or not. And of course, it's going to be the cop's word versus yours. If your son has one of those situations where he's schizophrenic or any other possibility of hundreds of issues and ends up somewhere away from you, you still need your son back, right? The crime of taking him all the way out there, or him getting onto a bus, whether he was abducted or whether he freeloaded out there, those are two different crimes. One of them he's the criminal, and one of them somebody else is the criminal. The important thing is that person's safety, though. That child needs to be safe. Now, what happens if that child is out there because they don't have a family? They're not out there because they're schizophrenic and got on a bus going somewhere. They're not out there because they were abducted and their family still loves them and wants to find them and wants them safe. They're out there because they don't have a family. At that point, it doesn't matter why you're out there. You're jail fodder. It doesn't matter why there's a bunch of stuff piled against my vehicle in a parking lot that I didn't ask to have all that stuff piled on my vehicle in. That's not my fault, but in this situation, who is it that's victimized? Just like the situation with Molly. Did anybody try to investigate that? No. They just went straight to victimizing me. Rob went straight to victimizing me at the Fred Meyer when the Molly situation happened. A lot of people did. A lot of people on my channel have also spoken about it too, like Alexander and Tom. And many more, about how horrible she was and about how she was all sweet as could be once she went inside. Me, I try to be a decent person all the time. I get on my YouTube channel and I scream for a reason. I'm overwhelmed. I need help. I can't scream in Fred Meyer's. I can't scream in the Denny's. I can't scream in the Starbucks. I don't have my own house to scream in. And boy, oh boy, do I have plenty of reasons to scream and get that release from screaming. And I do it from the privacy of my vehicle. It's the closest I have. A lot of people don't listen unless I'm screaming. For police officers to assist my predators in getting away with the crimes they committed by trying to have a false diagnosis put on me, that is entirely wrong. Dr. Estrada, he was told that I was schizophrenic. See, that's the thing. Scott DaCosta, since I was a Dual County safety, and he was the sheriff of Dual County, he got to be in charge of everything that happened there. All the information that they got. So he, as the sheriff, got to diagnose me as schizophrenic. He diagnosed me as schizophrenic so many times to so many people that he can't possibly hide it at this point. It's impossible for him to hide it. Many of those people, they screwed up, and they didn't realize until after the fact that they'd screwed up. They didn't realize that they should have actually checked into the situation and actually looked at evidence. See, they can't make that diagnosis without the evidence. But what happens when your predators take away your evidence? What happens when it's in a backpack and it's right outside of the room that you're in? And those cops told you they were taking you somewhere where you could make a police report. And you get there and they're not letting you take a police report. They're locking you up on suicidal ideations. Well, I'm not trying to fucking kill myself. I'm trying to turn in predators. And you're forcing me to do desperate shit. Over and over again, they ignore the abuse and try to harm me. They try to use the suicide watch thing to discredit the victim. Just like that girl who cuts on herself. When you see those cuts on her arms, chances are pretty good that her daddy's touching her inappropriately. 80% of the time, it's one of the parents. Keep that in mind. Then there's various family members. Your chances of having that happen to you by a homeless person, if you're not homeless. See, homeless people who are rapists, they definitely worry about that. Somebody will listen to somebody in a house, but if you do it to somebody on the streets, you can get away with it. There's both male and female victims of rapists on the streets. But if you're not living on the streets, your chances of being raped by a homeless person are less than 1 in 1,000. That's not less than 1 in 1,000 people. That's less than 1 in 1,000 rapes. Less than 1 in 1,000. For those of you in houses, I want you to keep that in mind. I also want you to keep in mind that in some places, homeless women report being raped up to 5 times a month. In some places, victims have been raped repeatedly every night. Being a homeless woman is a very scary proposition, and many homeless women that I know coupled up with violent men, because getting beaten maybe once or twice every few months is nothing in comparison with not having that man there, because anybody can harm you at any point in time. It's just you. You are alone. It is your word versus theirs, and nobody cares. Then we've got a lot of women's services. There are 15 services for women in Boulder County for every co-ed service. Obviously, I'm in Tillamook. I had to flee abuse in Colorado over the death of Natalie Bollinger. And a lot of people want to pretend that this abuse is just over the internet. No, look what I live in. Look at the conditions I live in. Neglect is abuse. I've called everybody there is to call, and I get the mentally ill treatment by all of them. Eventually, I start cursing and getting pretty irate. But I need you to take a look at how many people have been arrested that I tried to turn in, and you wouldn't listen. You want to pretend that I was schizophrenic and delusional. Then there's Marcia Estrada and her diagnosis. There's also the situations that were happening at the time, and the wool was pulled over the eyes of the courts. The wool was pulled over the eyes of the American people, and continues to be pulled over the eyes of them by these places you send me to. All these places I'm blown off and sent to. They tell me it's not their job and send me to someone else, who send me to someone else, who send me to someone else. It's bad enough getting that runaround when somebody harmed your kid. Imagine your kid having to go through and get that runaround and do it all themselves because there's no parent. Now, the one thing that really does stick out like a sore thumb is my speech issues. Marcia Estrada has spoken to me in the privacy of her office, where I have been in an environment that I did feel was safe. Not with Penny. With her, I never felt safe. She was nice at the beginning, but only at the beginning. Now, with Marcia Estrada, we get to look at that situation, about how on the paperwork that I've shown on this channel time and again, she states outright that I am not schizophrenic, not delusional. She states in that conversation that it is situational, and obviously it's situational. Even Scott DaCosta trying to diagnose me as ADHD. I'd had this argument before too, before I ever met Scott DaCosta. Is it ADHD or is it trauma manifesting itself in such a way that you're having difficulties communicating? Let's use the term be patient, or phrase. Be patient. It's also a statement or a command. Be patient. Now, when somebody is being harmed, collection of evidence is the most important and the most crucial in the first 24 hours. Hopefully, within the first few minutes, you want to be collecting evidence. And law enforcement is supposed to do this. Law enforcement forcing a disabled person to do their job while this disabled person is on a fixed income, and this disabled person is being abused by the public and is stuck in public and has been made homeless. You are setting them up for failure. I just wanted help so that I wasn't ripped off anymore, because most of you don't know the difference between autism and mental retardation. You don't know the difference between Down syndrome and mental retardation. You don't know the difference between cerebral palsy and mental retardation. Let's say your kid was abducted and they find him at a truck stop, wherever it happens to be. You've been looking for your kid. They found a kid matching that description. It might be a few states away even more difficult. Now, if your kid was abducted and is not schizophrenic and is out there because they were abducted, do you want the police to treat your child like he's schizophrenic, or do you want them to make sure your child gets safely home? Do you want to try to get the predator who did it to him off the street? Now imagine that you don't have that family. Who are they going to call? Who's going to care? You're found out in the middle of the street. You shouldn't have been there. You're talking some crazy talk about how you were kidnapped and dropped off there. They look it up. You don't have any parents. I mean, where were you abducted from? Why are you in the middle of it? Why are you at a truck stop in Arizona or something like that, you know? So if they want to put you into mental health, who's going to stop them? Who's going to stop them from just assuming that you made up being abducted? Once they find out that you don't have any parents and you were in a foster home somewhere else, they're not going to care that you were abducted. They're going to assume that you ran away from a foster home because you didn't want to be there. They're going to discredit you from the start. Now, just like with that girl who cuts herself and gets suicidal ideations, it's the same thing with a boy who is being victimized and he gets suicidal ideations. All of a sudden, no matter what, every piece of abuse that has ever happened to you is your fault because you want to die over it now. When it turned out that Waylon Lolotai was assaulting a lot of people and had a history of assaulting people before me, somebody should have taken it seriously. Someone should have actually looked it up. Instead of police officers only listening to my predators, refusing to look at any evidence that shows that they're my predators. This is what forced me to break the law to begin with. This is what forced me to have to threaten my predators back. The be patient thing. You got to hear Jason Scudder just talking theoretically. I didn't even get to finish what I was saying before he was saying he would shoot somebody if they were threatening his family. Or if people started pointing guns at Christian people, he'd shoot back. That is recorded on my channel. Now go back through my history. Do I have a history? Not really. My history of threatening people comes down to right after my grandma's funeral. And, of course, right before I was arrested in August. Those are the only 2 times I actually threatened anybody's life. And I was very specific about it. And the only 2 whose names I gave out in specific were who? Ted Bollinger and Donald Trump. Now, obviously, I am not going to kill them and have no interest in killing them. Obviously, what I had an interest in was getting law enforcement to do their fucking jobs. And I explained in all these situations that's what I was trying to do. I explained beforehand and afterhand. By August, though, I'd been abused enough and had false charges at Clearview Behavioral Health. They're closed down now, by the way, for exactly the things I told you they were doing. Waylon Lolotai is no longer an officer in Boulder because he was doing exactly what I told you he was doing. Michelle Quinn is no longer the sheriff of Garden County, Nebraska because she was doing what I said she was doing. Polly Olson is no longer the county treasurer in Dual County, Nebraska because she was doing what I was saying she was doing. Michelle DeCini, too, of Lincoln Correctional Center. Also, Sarah Nelson of Lincoln Correctional Center. There's a lot of these. There's also the 2 officers who assaulted Demetrius Shankling, resulting in his death. Making jokes the whole way. Thought it was hilarious. Then there's the child abuse that happened over at Sally Treon's. I wasn't heard there either. What happened with that? Well, a little girl got kicked in the face by a meth head. One of the other ladies who was staying there was pregnant. A year to the day after Natalie was killed, her son died. Neglect. Her child starved to death because Jeannie Gatlin was busy getting fucked up on methamphetamines. Why was Natalie all fucked up? She was fucked up on methamphetamines. How about the situation with Alicia Bollinger when she was on a high-speed chase with her dad through multiple states, Oklahoma and Kansas, with 18 grams of methamphetamines? What about Ted Bollinger getting busted with methamphetamines and a handgun after Natalie was killed? What about Natalie and Alicia both having a history of telling people about this abuse? and people's history of blowing them off because mentally ill. They're cutters. They're mentally ill. They're cutters. That's how it's viewed by the American public. That's how it's viewed by the medical community. That's how it's viewed by the state. And that's why it's viewed that way by the medical community. Oh, somebody is suicidal? You should lock them up. How about locking up their predator? How about trying that for once? How about recognizing that not every mental illness is schizophrenia? And how about getting rid of the word mentally ill, since it doesn't mean anything anyway? It is not a diagnosis. It is an excuse for looking the other way. Scott DaCosta, when I went to him about the video with his officer who did not make a report, what did he tell me? I asked him, did you watch the video? He said, just the first part. I said, why? He said, because your friend came out and said you were bipolar. Well, you guys can watch that video, Jordan Anderson, on my channel. That video has Laura Nelson in it. I believe it might be the first video, if not one of the first 10 on my channel. No, that would be the assault at Boulder Public Hospital. That would be one of the first ones on my channel. The part of a body camera footage that I got only had a tiny portion of the situation. There was 7 hours where I was scared shitless because Ted Bollinger kept on typing stuff to me on Alicia Bollinger's account, asking for the phone number, my phone number, that Alicia Bollinger had. She had my phone number. She called me on December 29th of 2017 after finding out her sister was dead. Well, she didn't know her sister was dead. She was asking if I knew where her sister was at. No, I didn't. After Natalie's death, her family got in contact with me every time first. Her mother to call me a stalker on a missing persons post about a friend's missing kid. Slandering my name. She's not a good parent. She's a drug addict, like both of my parents. Living in adverse conditions and being afraid of people because of things that people actually do. Being afraid every night that some meth addict is going to come knock on my window, because they quite often do. And it's recorded on my channel. They quite often do. Then there's the having to be afraid of police because they don't care that you were abused. They just don't want to see homeless people. They want you to go elsewhere. They want to push you when you've been abused to call somebody else, to go somewhere else. They want you to go to Portland, or they want you to go to Salem, or they want you to go to Eugene. Whatever it takes to run you out of town. And this is done to homeless people everywhere, while we're supposed to take a back seat to it happening to black people. We're supposed to go to the back of the bus because we're focusing on black issues right now. How about we take care of the most victimized people in the country first? The disabled, the homeless, children, and the elderly. The homeless are everyone's go-to victims. You had a bad day because you have to live with your husband, even knowing he's raping your daughters, because you can't keep the bills over your head by yourself. You're going to go take it out on a homeless person. You're going to walk down the street with your kids. You already know that your husband is touching them, but you're going to walk down the street with your kids anyway, and you're going to point at an ugly homeless person and stay away from those people. Or you're going to walk down there by yourself and yell really loud, "Oh my God, he looks like a rapist." What the fuck? Your bias are not schizophrenia. People telling me that their lives are being threatened. Well, look at the videos with Sarah Bacon. She admits that her life was being threatened. Her family's life was being threatened. She also admits that she's an alcoholic. That's more than I can say for Shannon Alvarado. She's an alcoholic too. She just didn't admit it. Now let's take a good look there at who it is that's able to diagnose schizophrenia and ask if any of the hospital workers, like the security guard or the nurses, or these officers who took me in, even if we ignore the 6-month criteria, do any of these people have the qualifications? No, they don't. They did this immorally and illegally with the intent of harm against me. Financial, physical, and ultimately sexual. It's time to stop this abuse. It's time to stop putting criminals in positions of power, and it is time to make sure that body cameras, as well as facility cameras with audio, are in all places where at-risk adults may be abused by a person in power. Nursing homes, group homes, hospitals. I never should have been raped as a child in any of the facilities that I was in by staff or children. I have first-hand experience in a lot of your statistics. Of all sex offenders, 70% of them were victims of sexual offenses as children. 70% of them. Also, you guys might not want to hear this, but when it comes to sex offenders, the statistics that we have are only on adults. When we look at those numbers and those statistics, that's only the adult numbers. Many of the children's numbers and records are kept safe. But what we do know is that when it comes to facilities, group homes, foster homes, juvenile facilities, most of the time it's the other inmates or foster kids who are going to abuse you. Now, the staff members, they are at a high likelihood of abusing you. We get to see how many nurses and how many doctors have taken those positions of power only to kill a whole bunch of patients. They got away with it for a long time. For a lot of people, they wanted me to be patient about them helping me to turn in the crimes against me. Situations where the police should have done their job and investigated it and contacted those people, instead of making me run around doing this, where they're just going to say, oh, well, he's mentally ill, he's mentally ill, he's mentally ill, inferring every time that I'm delusional or schizophrenic. And by doing so, most people want to believe the person with that position of power. And even if they don't believe that person in the position of power, they are afraid not to believe them. They're afraid of the consequences of showing or admitting that they might understand the situation. There's at least a dozen people on my channel recorded who knew about situations with Scott DaCosta and never came forward. I had to record the conversations and put them here on YouTube. I have to post a lot of the screenshots on Facebook. I also have to watch what I put there or hear. You know how these things go. Good to be rid of you. Thanks for coming to visit. Stay out of trouble or don't get caught. Remember, you are your brother's keeper and your sister's, and no victim left behind. Not even if they are schizophrenic. If somebody is schizophrenic and they have a black eye and they're walking down the road and you know they're schizophrenic, or even if you don't, if they tell you that their dad just punched them in the face, Well, they need to be protected. They're being abused. But then again, all their dad's got to say is, oh, he stepped on a rake. Oh, he walked into a door. He's mentally ill. He probably did it to himself.